Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about the first sneak peek trailer or video clip with no sound that we got for the next Marvel Future Fight update. It's not Infinity War, but it's basically the next best or possibly an even better thing. It's more X-Men, and before you start with your speculation, let me hit you with my speculation because I did a bit of homework up on what we can expect, and I've got some tips for you guys. I've got a lot of potential characters for you guys, some uniforms, and then I want to make some final comments on the wider community's reaction, because you know how I love to do that. In addition, you might probably notice that the lighting is a little bit different. The background is quite a bit different. I have moved. If you want me to talk about that in a later video, in another video, I can definitely do that. So let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, let's dive right in and replay this 6-second clip as many times as we humanly can. There's no sound, as I said. We see the Shadow walking into a room. It looks like a fancy room, an expensive room, as we'll see that play into. And then we see some spikes going into or coming out of a wall. And that's pretty obvious to X-Men fans as none other than Angel or Archangel, depending on which version you're discussing. Good guy, bad guy, kind of both. But yes, he's indeed a member of the X-Men, a mutant, and he's part of that faction. So we're definitely getting at least one new mutant. Immediately, what you should make sure that you already are doing in the game is farming M'Kraan crystals, Phoenix feathers, and M'Kraan shards up to 2,000 or as close to 2,000 as you can possibly get them. Of course, if you're brand new to the game, you have other priorities. These new characters are probably not going to make a huge impact for you, but for those of us that are at the end game, as I am, that's kind of the idea moving forward. And we'll discuss as well the issue of adding characters without fundamentally changing or altering any of the existing game modes and how that will negatively impact the game, but we've discussed that quite a few times already. Beyond Archangel or Angel, who can we expect? Well, here's the thing. There's not that many other X-Force or X-Factor teammates remaining that are very popular. And the reason why I jump to the X-Force is because on Twitter, at least, and I believe on Facebook as well, they released the video with the following tagline: "This is this mutant's or this person's X-Factor." X-Factor is also a word used to indicate that someone has kind of a special ability. In the case of comic books, in the case of mutants, it's their mutant abilities. So, you know, Quicksilver's X-Factor is he can run really fast, and he's also super annoying in timeline, and so on and so forth. But given that, we can hopefully cross our fingers for Iceman. Yes. The kind of male version of Luna Snow should be coming in the next update because he is part of the original X-Men team and also part of the original X-Factor team. The original X-Men team were also referred to as the X-Factor team, consisting of Cyclops, Beast, Jean Grey, who we already have, and then finally Angel and Iceman. So I cannot explain to you or exclaim to you without raising my voice too much how much I'm excited for Iceman, but this is probably as good as it's going to get in terms of the timing for Netmarble to bring Iceman. If they don't give us Iceman with this update, we're probably never going to see him. It doesn't make any more sense than right now. Beyond X-Men, like Angel and Iceman, however, there's a few other characters that we can kind of hope to see. In terms of villains, we already have Apocalypse, and he clashed regularly with the X-Factor as part of his mutant team, the Alliance of Evil. So we could see an original look for Apocalypse that has kind of those tubes, that has more of the purple coloring going on with the black and the gray and the blue instead of the red, but it's kind of unlikely. However, in addition to Apocalypse, we could see characters like, and I know these names are going to sound ridiculous, Frenzy, Tower, Stinger, and Time Shadow. I didn't just make up these names, they're actually names of mutants. However, for a lot of you listening, they're going to be names that you've probably never heard or only heard very briefly. So I doubt that Netmarble is going to invest too heavily into very unknown characters. Not that they're not beloved by someone, but let's just be honest, they're not very high on the popularity scale. Some other options that we could get, some other teams and other villains from that angle who have clashed with the X Factor. And keep in mind, there have been a couple of X Factor teams, so I'm not going to go necessarily chronologically, but I am going to touch on the villains now. We could see the Marauders, and the Marauders were a group of mutants that were assembled by Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is probably one of the more well-known villains, alongside guys like Magneto and Apocalypse, fighting against the X-Men. He's kind of the geneticist, he's the scientist kind of guy. He looks super creepy with the kind of reddish lips and the white kind of silvery skin. And Mr. Sinister is probably pretty well known for giving Gambit his kind of ticket into the comics. Gambit was already a person, he already had mutant powers, but then Mr. Sinister kind of made it easier for Gambit to control his powers, kind of like what Professor X did for a lot of the X-Men, but different, not the same, but kind of the same. So we could be seeing Gambit as well, because they tie it together pretty nicely, so that would be awesome, although Gambit's not necessarily a villain. But part of the Marauders, we could also see Sabretooth and Mystique, who are two very popular fan favorite villains. On top of those characters, we could see characters like Ares, Azimuth, Chimera, and Coda. Again, not very popular, not well known, but definitely germane to the topic of X-Men, mutants, and X Factor. Finally, we had a team in the 90s called the Government Team. And that was the government kind of created or associated X Factor team, and it didn't have any of the original members. It did have Quicksilver, shocker, so we could still be seeing a uniform for Quicksilver, although the other update with Voyager seems like a fake now. In addition to Quicksilver, we could be seeing Cyclops' brother Havoc, which would be cool because I've seen some comments on the Reddit saying that Havoc could have an immunity to all of Cyclops' attacks, which would be hilarious. And then Multiple Man, who is also potentially quite powerful. Polaris, who we thought was going to be in the update with Blue Marvel and the other Ultimates, but she wasn't, so it would be nice to see her now. And then also Wolfsbane and Strongman. The interesting thing with Polaris is that at one point she was Iceman's girlfriend. Now, or like the more current issue of Iceman, he is gay. So it will be interesting to see how Netmarble goes about it. Not that they have relationships in this game as kind of a factor, but if they were going to introduce Polaris, would they make that connection in addition to introducing Iceman? I'm kind of assuming Iceman is a guarantee here, people. Or are they going to skip over that entirely? My guess is they'd skip over it, but I just wanted to throw it out there as kind of a question mark to see how Netmarble handles that situation and how Marvel wants them to proceed, probably with the more current iteration of Iceman, who everybody likes, but we'll have to wait and see. In addition to the suggestions I've already given you for banking up M'Kraan crystals, Phoenix feathers, and M'Kraan shards, there's also the discussion that the community's had about the cost of these characters. Now, whether they come in as biometric selector characters is obviously not an option because they are X-Men or they are mutants, so they're going to come in one of two forms. They're either going to be farmable through some sort of epic quest, or they're going to be part of these X-Gene Selector characters. We also have the X-Gene Selector in the lab, which I'm not particularly fond of, excuse me, but unfortunately it is another option for them. I don't hope that this is the primary means for getting characters, but hopefully it's a secondary means. I've seen a lot of people suggest special missions if we're getting a group of 4 or 5 X-Men with a villain as a shifter. That's another great option. I wouldn't rule out an epic quest at all to kind of power up Angel or Archangel. We could also see uniforms for Angel to give his Archangel villain tag, which would be very cool to see something like that. We could, however, unlikely see a uniform for Jean Grey because there was a run in X Factor where Her clone, I think her name's Madeline, became the Goblin Queen, so that's another option there. But she's not necessarily or technically Jean Grey. She's a new character, so I doubt that Netmarble would just throw that in as a uniform for an already overpowered character. Fingers crossed we don't get any Quicksilver stuff. But finally, I wanted to touch on two things that are kind of lingering as question marks from the community. The first one is the cost, which I've kind of already started to discuss, but I wanted to go back to it. I don't think we should be as concerned with the cost as I see a lot of people being concerned with the cost. I think Netmarble understands the love that we have for the X-Men, and while Magneto wasn't cheap, I think if we get another situation like Jean Grey, like Magneto, and like the X-Men Epic Quest, I don't think anyone's going to be upset. This was a really great piece of content. It brought a lot of new players to the game. It brought a lot of new content that people are still playing to this day. It brought farmable content, and I think it did the kind of deluxe pack the right way, as opposed to the Black Panther pack, which gave us things that we didn't necessarily want or need, like a tier 2 ticket, like a comic card, like a CTP. This always gives us something we can use. You know, biometrics are flexible. You can get Magneto's biometrics. You can get about 20 per day. You can use them for other native tier 2s. You can bank them up for a future Magneto uniform. There's so many options. You get gold from this mission that you get every day forever. You get, of course, very rare resources like Mcron crystals, shards, and phoenix feathers. So I think if Netmarble does an epic pack or some sort of package that way with that kind of intention, I think the community will be receptive to it. If they do something like the Black Panther pack or the Adam Warlock pack, I don't think the community is going to be as receptive to it, but we shouldn't have that as our primary focus. Our primary focus instead should be game modes. I think that Netmarble needs to make one crucial change, or one kind of effortful change to an existing game mode with this update. Whether they change around, something in Arena is really where I would put my hopes. Whether it's Timeline Battle, Alliance Tournament, Alliance Conquest, or Battle World, I think one of these needs a shakeup big time. So that would be kind of the X factor for that I'm going to be looking for, and that you should be looking for with this update. Rather than the cost of these characters, rather than worrying about what kind of shenanigans Netmarble might pull in terms of trying to get people to pay for characters don't actually consist of content. So we should be really focusing on what new content is going to come out with this game, what new game modes or existing game modes could be tweaked to accompany and kind of mesh with these incoming characters, these new X-Men. Are they going to somehow mutate the existing Rise of the X-Men Epic Quest and turn it into like a two-parter? Do you have to revisit it and revisit old levels with new characters? Who knows? But that should be the focus of everyone, and I hope that with that we can become simultaneously more positive about the upcoming update and not so negative about the cost, but also having our priorities in order, that we should be focusing on the existing framework that this game provides and how these new characters are going to fit in a fun way, rather than just ending up being, I can clear Infinity Thanos with Iceman or Luna Snow. It really makes no difference at the end of the day. So hopefully you can take that away from this first sneak peek. Also, let me know what your thoughts are on existing and upcoming characters or tweaks to game modes. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.